This is Dreamtime Science, where we turn fascinating discoveries into bedtime companions. Tonight's journey promises something genuinely intriguing. You know what's fascinating? How the ground beneath our feet can feel so steady one moment, and then suddenly shift in ways that remind us just how alive our planet really is. I've been thinking about what actually happens deep underground when the Earth decides to break. And there's something remarkable about the quiet forces at work that build up until, snap, everything changes. Tonight, I'd love to share what science has uncovered about those sudden movements and why the Earth doesn't just stay still all the time. Should you find solace in these cosmic lullabies, consider becoming a regular dreamer by subscribing. Share what topics intrigue your curious mind in the comments below. Now, take a moment, adjust your blanket, find the perfect hollow in your pillow, let your shoulders melt, breathe in and out. Beneath your feet, the world seems stable, the floor, the ground, the earth itself, so solid, so unwavering. Yet every so often, this apparent certainty is shattered by a trembling that ripples through the land, sending buildings swaying, rivers sloshing, and hearts racing. The planet, for all its ancient dignity and mass, moves. It quivers and roars, as though some giant stirs in its sleep below. To most of us, an earthquake is an event wrapped in suddenness and surprise, a jolt in the midst of routine, a reminder that the world is not as unyielding as it seems. For as long as humans have walked upon the earth, they have felt these convulsions and wondered at their cause. In the darkness before science, stories blossomed. Myths sprang up to fill the void, each culture weaving its own vision of why the ground beneath could betray its promise of stillness. In the archipelago of Japan, the people once spoke of Namazu, the giant catfish slumbering deep in the mud beneath their islands. Namazu was a restless creature, its whiskered bulk shifting and twisting in the unseen gloom. When it thrashed, the earth above would tremble and crack, tossing houses from their foundations, toppling pagodas, and splitting open the calm surface of the land. To appease Namazu, prayers and offerings were made, rituals enacted to coax it back to sleep. The image of the catfish remains, an echo of fear and fascination, a symbol of the unpredictable. Far to the west, in ancient Greece, Poseidon reigned not only as lord of the seas but also as earth-shaker. His trident, when struck upon the ocean floor, sent shock waves rippling through the world. The Greeks watched their temples sway and columns tumble, and in their trembling terror they pictured the god's wrath made manifest. Poseidon's moods explained the unexplainable, his anger a force that only sacrifice or supplication could soothe. Across the Pacific, the indigenous peoples of the Americas held their own tales. The Salinan people of California spoke of a great spirit, the earth coyote, who supported the world on his broad back. When he shifted his weight or grew restless, the ground would shudder, and splits would open in the land. In Peru, Inca mythology told of Pachamama, the Earth Mother, whose occasional discomfort sent tremors through the Andes to remind the people to honor her with due reverence. In India, the earth was said to rest upon the backs of mighty elephants, who in turn stood atop a giant turtle, itself supported by a serpent. When one of these elephants grew weary and shifted, or when the turtle twitched, the world above would quake. Layer upon layer of imagination, each myth a lens through which humanity sought to make sense of the unpredictable. Even in the modern era, echoes of these stories linger. Films depict cities rent asunder by invisible forces, skyscrapers tumbling as if the world itself were an angry child sweeping away its toys. In literature, earthquakes become metaphors for emotional upheaval or social collapse, their suddenness a stand-in for the unpredictable turns of fate. The trembling planet remains a potent symbol, a reminder of our smallness before the vast and mysterious earth. Yet beneath these myths and metaphors, beneath the poetry and the fear, lies a reality both more prosaic and more wondrous. The earth is no static sphere, no rigid shell. It is restless, alive in its own slow, titanic way. The forces that drive its trembling are not the moods of gods or the wrigglings of great beasts, but the inevitable consequence of a dynamic planet, a world still cooling, still evolving, still in motion after more than 4 billion years. To understand this, let us peel back the surface, layer by layer. The ground beneath your feet is but the thinnest of veneers. The crust, a brittle skin of rock no more than 12 to 100 kilometers thick, depending on where you stand. Beneath that crust, the mantle stretches down for nearly 3,000 kilometers, a realm of slow, convecting rock, solid, yes, but so hot and under such pressure that it flows, inch by inch, like taffy over the eons. Deeper still, the core, first a sea of molten iron, then, at the very heart, a solid sphere, hotter than the surface of the sun. The crust, fractured and pieced together like a jigsaw puzzle, does not sit quietly atop this restless mantle. Instead, it is broken into massive slabs, tectonic plates, that float and slide and grind against one another, driven by the slow churn of heat rising from below. Where plates meet, the boundaries are anything but peaceful. Some plates collide, crumpling the crust into mountain ranges. Others pull apart, birthing new seafloor in ribbons of volcanic fire. Most ominously, some plates slip past each other, locked together by friction, until, with a sudden lurch, they break free. This is the birthplace of earthquakes. Before the science of plate tectonics, the notion that continents could move was dismissed as fantasy, less plausible perhaps than the idea of a world balanced on elephants and turtles. But in the 20th century, evidence began to accumulate. The matching coastlines of Africa and South America, the distribution of fossils, the patterns of earthquakes and volcanoes tracing invisible seams across the globe. The earth, it seemed, was not as fixed as it appeared. The mythic tremors of old were the surface expression of a deeper, ceaseless dance. But before we journey deeper into the science of this dance, let us linger for a moment with the human experience of the earthquake, an experience that is always both personal and communal, always tinged with the unknown. The first sign is often sound, a rumble, distant and indistinct, like thunder heard through stone. The floor shudders, as if some great animal is passing beneath the house. Objects rattle on shelves, windows flex in their frames. For a few seconds, or perhaps a minute, the world itself becomes untrustworthy. In these moments, time stretches and warps. The mind races. Is this the big one? Should I run or duck or pray? There is no time for calm appraisal, no pause for analysis. The animal within takes over, adrenaline flooding the blood, senses sharpened and narrowed. When the shaking stops, a hush follows, a moment of stillness in which the world seems to hold its breath. Only then do people begin to emerge, to count the cost, to share their stories. These stories become part of the fabric of memory, shaping communities and cultures. In San Francisco, the memory of 1906 lingers still, the city remade by fire and fault. In Lisbon, the great quake of 1755, followed by fire and tsunami, reshaped not only the city, but the very course of European philosophy. How could a just and loving God allow such destruction? Asked Voltaire and his contemporaries, their faith shaken as much as the stones underfoot. The trembling of the earth, it seemed, could rearrange the furniture of the mind as well as the architecture of cities. Over time, people have sought to predict the unpredictable, to read omens in the flight of birds or the behavior of animals. Dogs barking, snakes emerging from the earth, cattle refusing to enter their barns, each a possible warning, each a thread of hope in the face of uncertainty. In Japan, tales abound of cats and carp fleeing to higher ground before a quake strikes. In China, the legend of Haicheng tells of a city evacuated hours before a 1975 earthquake after mass reports of strange animal behavior. Science, cautious and methodical, has searched for patterns, for precursors, for any sign that might offer a few seconds' warning. But the earth keeps its secrets well. The signals are subtle, the noise overwhelming, and yet, despite the unpredictability, despite the fear, there is a kind of awe in the trembling of the planet. To stand upon the earth as it moves is to sense for a moment the vast energies at work beneath your feet, the slow, inexorable processes that shape the continents, raise the mountains, and carve the deep ocean trenches. Every quake is a whisper from the planet's heart, a message written in the language of force and fracture. In popular culture, earthquakes are often depicted as cataclysmic, world-ending events, a director's dream of spectacle and chaos. Skyscrapers topple, bridges collapse, chasms open in the streets, swallowing cars and crowds alike. The reality is both more mundane and more profound. Most earthquakes are small, felt only as a faint tremor, or not at all. Even the largest, while devastating, are local, their effects rippling outward in waves that soon fade into the background noise of the earth. Yet the power contained in these events is staggering. A single magnitude 8 quake releases as much energy as the detonation of millions of tons of TNT, the equivalent of hundreds of nuclear bombs. And all this from the slow accumulation of strain along invisible faults, the gradual build-up of pressure until, in a heartbeat, the world snaps back into motion. These faults, lines of weakness where the crust is prone to fracture, are the seams along which the Earth's surface is stitched together. Some are famous: the San Andreas in California, the North Anatolian in Turkey, the Alpine Fault in New Zealand. Others are hidden, their dangers revealed only when they wake from centuries of slumber. To live upon the earth is to live with these faults, to accept the possibility that at any moment the ground might move. And so societies adapt. In Mexico City, where the soft sediments of an ancient lake amplify the shaking, buildings are designed to sway and flex rather than shatter. In Japan, skyscrapers stand atop giant shock absorbers, their foundations isolated from the trembling ground. Drills and warning systems, emergency supplies and evacuation plans, all are woven into the fabric of daily life. The mythic catfish has given way to the science of engineering, but the sense of unease remains. Yet for all our preparation, for all our understanding, the fundamental mystery endures. Why does the earth shake? What unseen hand moves the stones beneath our feet? The answers, as we shall see, lie not in the caprice of gods or the whims of monsters, but in the deep, slow processes that shape the planet itself. The trembling of the earth is a signal, a sign that the world is alive and changing, its surface in perpetual motion. As we drift toward the edge of sleep, let us hold on to that sense of awe, the knowledge that we are inhabitants of a living, restless world. The myths of old remind us of our need to explain, to find meaning in the chaos. The science to come will reveal the patterns beneath the surface, the hidden order in the apparent disorder. But for now, the earth lies silent, its secrets waiting below, the stage set for the next act in the story of the trembling planet. And somewhere, in the darkness beneath, the ancient catfish stirs. Beneath the familiar crust of continents and seas, the world is divided not by the lines drawn on maps, but by fractures and scars, by faults that snake for hundreds, sometimes thousands, of kilometers through the bedrock. These are not the neat boundaries you might see from an airplane window, nor the sharp ridgelines that mark the horizon at dusk, but rather invisible, shifting seams of incredible power. They are the fault lines, and through their silent language, the earth whispers both warning and wonder. In the stillness of deep time, these lines move at an imperceptible pace. Centimetre by centimetre, year by year, their movement is measured not in the days of a human life, but in the lifespans of mountains, oceans, and continents themselves. Yet, In a single, unheralded moment, all that slow accumulation of strain can transform into sudden violence. The ground shudders, splits, and roars, a reminder that the world beneath our feet is never truly still. Let us begin by following one such fault, hidden beneath the dust and cities of California. The San Andreas Fault is a name that echoes in both scientific literature and popular imagination, a crack stretching some 1,200 kilometers along the western edge of North America. Here, two immense tectonic plates, the Pacific and the North American, grind past one another with a relentless, stubborn force. Their meeting is not a smooth handshake, but a grinding, jostling contest of will, each plate inching along its own path. The Pacific plate slides northwestward, while the North American plate drifts to the southeast. Between them lies not a clean break, but a complex zone of fractures, splays, and subsidiary faults. Walking along the San Andreas, you might notice nothing at first. The land is ordinary: fields, chaparral, dry creek beds, the occasional fence line. Yet if you look closely, you may see where a fence has been offset, a road jogs awkwardly, or a stream bends sharply, all silent records of the fault's restless shifting. These are the visible traces, but most of the story is hidden deep below, where ancient pressures build and build. Faults like the San Andreas are more than just cracks. They are zones of weakness where the Earth's crust can suddenly slip. The rocks on either side are locked together by friction, resisting the inexorable motion of the plates. For decades, even centuries, the strain accumulates, bending and flexing the crust like a bowstring drawn ever tighter. Eventually, the friction can hold no more, and the rocks lurch past each other in a spasm of motion. This is the earthquake, a fleeting release of energy that radiates outward in seismic waves, shaking the ground, toppling buildings, and sometimes forever altering landscapes. But the San Andreas is only one thread in a tapestry that covers the globe. Across the world, faults take many forms. Some are great, single fractures. Others are braided networks of cracks, branching and rejoining like the roots of an ancient tree. There are strike-slip faults, where plates slide horizontally past one another, normal faults, where the crust is pulled apart and one side drops down, and reverse or thrust faults, where rocks are pushed over each other as the crust is compressed. Each fault type has its own quirks, its own history written in the angles of rocks, the alignment of valleys, and the sudden jarring steps in the land. The largest and most dangerous are often found at the boundaries of tectonic plates, where the planet's rigid outer shell is divided into pieces as vast as continents themselves. These plates drift atop the semi-fluid mantle below, a slow-motion dance powered by the convective heat rising from the Earth's core, swirling and churning like water in a simmering pot. You may wonder, why do these plates move at all? The answer lies in the restless heart of the planet. Deep inside, radioactive decay and residual heat from Earth's formation drive convection currents in the mantle. These currents tug at the underside of the plates, dragging them apart at mid-ocean ridges, shoving them together at subduction zones, and grinding them past one another along transform faults. The result is a planet in perpetual motion, a living, breathing world whose very surface is never fixed. Some fault lines are visible at the surface, while others lie buried beneath layers of sediment or ocean. The great subduction zones, for example, are hidden deep beneath the waves. Here, one plate dives beneath another, plunging into the mantle and carrying water and minerals with it. This process triggers the largest and most destructive earthquakes known to science. Along the coasts of Japan, Chile, and the Pacific Northwest, the ground sometimes heaves upward by meters in a matter of seconds, generating tsunamis that race across the ocean at jetliner speeds. Yet, for all our knowledge, the behavior of faults remains elusive. Each one is unique, shaped by its geology, its history, and even by the water and gases that seep along its length. The rocks themselves can vary from hard, crystalline granite to crumbly clay, and this determines how they will break, slide, or stick. Some faults slip quietly in what are called aseismic creep events, moving so gradually that only the most sensitive instruments can detect them. Others are silent for centuries, storing up vast amounts of energy before unleashing it all at once. Scientists have spent generations trying to unravel the secrets of these hidden triggers. Seismologists place arrays of sensors along known faults, listening for the faintest tremors that might herald a larger quake. They map the landscape in exquisite detail, searching for subtle changes in elevation, tilt, or strain. Satellite radar can now detect ground shifts of mere millimeters, revealing the slow deformation that foreshadows disaster. In laboratories, researchers squeeze and twist rock samples, measuring how they fail and fracture under pressure. Despite all this, the ability to predict exactly when and where an earthquake will occur remains beyond our grasp. The Earth is too complex, too chaotic for certainty. Small earthquakes can sometimes relieve stress, but just as often they are the prelude to something far larger. Patterns emerge and disappear. Foreshocks may or may not precede a major event. Aftershocks ripple through the crust for weeks or months, a reminder that the story is never truly over. The limits of our understanding are not just technical, but also philosophical. The crust is a non-linear system, teetering on the edge between stability and chaos. Like a sand pile grown too tall, it can collapse suddenly, unpredictably, with a single misplaced grain. Theories abound. Perhaps there are subtle signals, a change in groundwater chemistry, a burst of low-frequency tremors, a mysterious glow in the sky. Yet each time a new method is proposed, the Earth finds a way to surprise us. There are, to be sure, patterns that can be discerned. The recurrence intervals of large earthquakes along some faults can be estimated. Perhaps every 150 years, give or take a few decades, a segment of the San Andreas will rupture. But these are averages, not schedules. Some faults slip more often, others go quiet for centuries. The Parkfield segment of the San Andreas, for instance, was so regular in its earthquakes that scientists installed a dense array of instruments hoping to catch the next one in real time. The quake came, but not quite as expected, and the lessons learned were both humbling and invaluable. Modern technology has given us tools undreamed of a century ago. Global Positioning System, GPS receivers, fixed to bedrock, measure the slow motion of plates to within a few millimeters. Strain meters buried deep underground record the stretching and squeezing of the crust. Supercomputers simulate the propagation of seismic waves through complex geology, helping to anticipate how an earthquake, once begun, might unfold. But these are instruments of description, not prophecy. For communities living atop major faults, the uncertainty is both a burden and a spur to action. Engineers design buildings to sway rather than shatter, to absorb and dissipate the energy of a quake. Early warning systems, now operating in places like Japan and California, can give a few seconds' notice, just enough to halt trains, stop elevators, and allow people to duck under sturdy tables. It is a small comfort, bought with decades of effort and the lessons of past disasters. Yet the ultimate trigger remains hidden, locked in the darkness deep below. Sometimes a fault will rupture in silence, the only evidence a faint shudder recorded on distant instruments. Other times the rupture will break the surface, opening great fissures in fields and roads, toppling trees and sending dust billowing into the sky. The energy released in a major earthquake is almost unimaginable. A medium-sized event can unleash as much energy as the explosion of several nuclear bombs, all in the span of a few seconds. The question of prediction haunts the science. Can we ever know with certainty when the next great quake will strike? Some look to history, poring over old records, searching for patterns in the dates and magnitudes of past events. Others turn to the rocks themselves, digging trenches along faults to uncover layers of displaced sediment, a kind of geological diary, recording the moments when the ground shifted. These studies, called paleoseismology, have revealed the long memory of faults stretching back thousands of years. Still, the future resists our probing. The physics of faults is a story of thresholds and feedbacks, of stick and slip, of sudden transitions from stability to chaos. The system is sensitive to initial conditions in a way that defies easy calculation. A slip here, a shift there, and the outcome can change utterly. Some scientists liken faults to a ticking clock, winding down toward an inevitable release. Others see them as more like a loaded dice, with the odds changing subtly from moment to moment. Around the world, other fault systems tell their own tales. The North Anatolian Fault in Turkey, the Alpine Fault in New Zealand, the Sunda megathrust off Indonesia, each is a theatre of immense forces, each has its own rhythm and hazards. In some places, the faults are so deeply buried that their existence is only inferred from occasional quakes and the bending of rocks far above. In others, they are starkly visible, etched into the landscape like scars. From space, the legacy of faults is even more apparent. Satellite imagery reveals long, straight valleys, offset streams, and ridges that trace the invisible hand of tectonics. These are the surface expressions of processes that have shaped continents, raised mountain ranges, and opened oceans. The very continents themselves are mosaics of ancient faults, stitched together by the restless motion of plates over billions of years. The limits of our knowledge are also limits of imagination. We can model, we can measure, we can even simulate entire fault systems in silico, but the real Earth is always more complicated, more subtle, more alive. No instrument can measure every grain of sand, every drop of water, every chemical reaction that might tip the balance. Faults are not just physical features, but living systems, evolving over time, responding to forces both seen and unseen. There is a humility in this, a recognition that our understanding, while profound, is still incomplete. The Earth is both laboratory and teacher, offering up clues in the form of tremors, cracks, and patterns in the rocks. Each earthquake, each slip along a fault, is a lesson written in motion and stone, a reminder that the world is not fixed, but ever-changing. As night settles over the landscape, as the stars wheel quietly overhead, the faults lie waiting in the darkness, silent and unseen. Their power is not diminished by our ignorance, nor revealed by our instruments alone. The ground beneath us is both foundation and mystery, and the next chapter in its story is always just out of reach. And so the world sleeps, the faults slumbering in their hidden chambers, the plates drifting silently onward. Yet even in this seeming stillness, the forces that shape our world are at work deep below, preparing the stage for the next act in the restless, ongoing drama of the Earth. The story of seismology begins with a tremor, not merely of the ground, but of human curiosity. For as long as humans have felt the Earth shiver beneath their feet, they have sought to understand what lies behind these sudden, mysterious convulsions. Yet for countless generations, earthquakes were interpreted through the prisms of mythology and fear. A dragon stirring, the wrath of gods, or restless spirits shifting in the deep. It would take both the blossoming of scientific thought and the slow accumulation of technological ingenuity before humanity could begin to peel back the veils and truly listen to the Earth's hidden language. Let us drift back to the year 132 CE, to the imperial court of the Han dynasty in China. Here, in a world lit by oil lamps and governed by celestial cycles, a remarkable mind named Zhang Heng crafted a device that would become the ancestor of all earthquake detectors. His seismoscope, as we might now call it, was a bronze vessel adorned with 8 dragon heads, each clutching a tiny bronze ball in its mouth. Within the vessel, a delicate mechanism awaited the faintest tremor. When the ground shook, a pendulum inside the urn would swing, tipping one of the dragon's mouths downward and releasing its ball. The ball would drop into the waiting mouth of a toad, positioned below, making a distinct sound, a signal that an earthquake had occurred, and even indicating the direction from which it had come. Though this ancient instrument could not record the magnitude of an earthquake or trace its seismic waves, it stands as a testament to an enduring impulse, the desire to render the invisible visible and the undetectable detectable. For centuries, this impulse would slumber, awaiting the tools and theories to give it new life, move forward through the centuries, past the fall of empires and the rise of new sciences. It is not until the scientific renaissance of the 18th and 19th centuries that the quest to systematically study earthquakes gathers force. The philosophical shift from supernatural explanations to natural causes, sparked by thinkers like Isaac Newton and the geologists who followed him, laid the groundwork for a new kind of observation, one rooted in careful measurement, in repeatable experiment, in the language of mathematics. The first true seismographs, machines capable of recording the motion of the ground, emerged in the 19th century. In 1841, the Scottish physicist James David Forbes constructed a simple device, a bar suspended by wires above a bowl of mercury. When the earth shook, the relative motion between the suspended bar and the ground was recorded by the ripples in the mercury. It was a primitive beginning, but it revealed a profound truth. The Earth's movement could be traced, captured, and studied as a physical phenomenon. Yet the real leap forward came with the invention of the mechanical seismograph. In 1880, in the earthquake-prone archipelago of Japan, the British geologist John Milne, together with Thomas Gray and James Ewing, devised the horizontal pendulum seismograph. Their instrument used a heavy mass suspended by a wire with a stylus that traced its motion onto a rotating drum of smoked glass. When the earth trembled, the pendulum's inertia kept it relatively stationary, while the earth and the drum moved beneath it, leaving a jagged telltale line, the seismogram. With this invention, the once invisible shudders of the planet were etched into a permanent, decipherable script. The seismograph was not just a tool for recording. It became an invitation to unlock riddles long hidden in the Earth's dark interior. The undetectable had found its first true interpreter. As the 20th century dawned, seismology blossomed into a science of extraordinary reach. Networks of seismographs sprang up across the continents, their silent sentinels waiting for the next cosmic pulse. These machines, at first mechanical, then electronic, grew ever more sensitive, capable of detecting not just the catastrophic shake of a major quake, but the faintest tremor, waves that might travel from the other side of the globe. With these networks in place, scientists soon noted something astonishing. An earthquake, like a struck bell, sent waves radiating outward in all directions, traveling through the planet's interior. These seismic waves came in two main varieties, the fast, compressional P waves and the slower, shearing S waves. P waves could travel through solids, liquids, and gases alike, while S waves could only move through solids. This difference would prove crucial. In 1906, the British geologist Richard Dixon Oldham analysed seismograms from distant earthquakes and observed that S waves simply vanished at certain distances from the quake's source. He realized that somewhere deep within the Earth there must be a region, liquid and impenetrable to S waves. This was the first inkling of the Earth's molten outer core, a discovery made not by digging or drilling, but by listening to the echoes of distant earthquakes. Not long after, in 1936, the Danish seismologist Inge Lehmann, poring over the arrival times of seismic waves, discerned something even more subtle. Some P waves, it seemed, could be faintly detected where they should have been blocked by the liquid core. she deduced that within the molten core there must be a solid inner sphere, a solid inner core, floating inside the Earth like a pearl within a shell. Here was a stunning insight, revealed not by sight or touch, but by the invisible signatures traced on paper by seismographs. As the world's seismic networks expanded, so too did the sophistication of the tools. In the aftermath of the Second World War, the Cold War's anxious gaze turned downward. Nuclear tests, conducted in secret, could send tremors through the Earth, just as natural earthquakes did. To monitor clandestine explosions, global arrays of ultra-sensitive seismometers were established, forming the backbone of seismic monitoring to this day. Modern seismometers are marvels of precision. Instead of mechanical levers and smoked glass, they use electromagnetic induction, laser interferometry, even quantum sensors cooled to frigid temperatures. The principle, however, remains the same. A mass is delicately suspended, and any movement of the ground is detected as a relative motion between the mass and its frame. Electronic circuits amplify these motions, digitize them, and transmit them across the world in an instant. The result is a ceaseless vigilance. Every day the Earth trembles with thousands of quakes, most too faint for us to notice. Yet each one is captured by this global web, its vibrations parsed and catalogued, its origin and magnitude computed by algorithms that would have seemed like magic to the pioneers of the field. But seismology is not merely a science of waiting and listening. It is also a science of testing, of probing the Earth with controlled vibrations. In the early 20th century, scientists began to set off small explosions or drop heavy weights onto the ground to create artificial earthquakes. By analyzing the resulting seismic waves, they could map the layers of rock beneath the surface, tracing the boundaries between different strata, locating hidden faults, even searching for reservoirs of oil and water. This method, known as reflection seismology, became an indispensable tool in both geology and industry. The echoes of man-made quakes, like sonar in the ocean, reveal the invisible architecture of the Earth, from the shallowest sediments to the deepest crust. Yet there are other, more delicate signals that seismologists have learned to detect. The Earth is never truly still. It is pervaded by a constant background hum, a low-frequency vibration driven by the pounding of ocean waves, the rush of wind across mountain ranges, the subtle flexing of tides. This microseismic noise, once dismissed as a nuisance, has become a new frontier. By sifting through this background, scientists have discovered ways to study the properties of the Earth's crust and mantle with unprecedented detail, even in regions where earthquakes are rare. And so, the evolution of seismology has been shaped by both invention and serendipity, by the patient refinement of instruments and the lucky insight gleaned from an unexpected pattern in the data. Each advance has opened new windows into the Earth's interior, revealing truths that lay hidden for billions of years. Consider, for example, the momentous discovery of plate tectonics, a theory that owes much to the labor of seismologists. Throughout the mid-20th century, researchers mapped the locations of earthquakes around the world and found that they were not evenly scattered, but clustered in narrow bands, along oceanic ridges, deep-sea trenches, and the meandering scars of continental faults. These patterns, together with the study of seismic wave paths and speeds, painted a picture of a restless planet whose crust is broken into great slabs, forever colliding, drifting, and plunging into the mantle. Perhaps nowhere is the ingenuity of earthquake science more evident than in the quest to issue warnings, to detect the undetectable not just for curiosity's sake, but to save lives. In regions where earthquakes strike with little warning, such as Japan or California, networks of seismometers are linked in real time to computer systems that analyze incoming waves. When an earthquake begins, P waves, traveling faster than the more destructive S waves, are detected first. By rapidly calculating the quake's location and magnitude, These systems can issue alerts, sometimes seconds before the strongest shaking arrives. It is not much, but in those fleeting moments, trains are halted, surgeries are paused, and people can duck beneath shelter, an extraordinary testament to the power of early detection. The saga of earthquake science is also a story of collaboration and open inquiry. Large-scale experiments such as the deployment of thousands of temporary seismometers in arrays across entire continents have revealed the fine structure of tectonic plates, the branching of faults, the presence of hidden magma chambers, and ancient rift valleys. The EarthScope project, for example, placed a grid of instruments across North America, recording not only earthquakes but also the subtle warping of the crust as it responds to the forces that shape mountains and basins. In laboratories, too, researchers have built analogues of fault systems, slabs of rock compressed until they fracture, sandboxes where miniature faults slip and slide, computer models simulating the birth and propagation of seismic waves. High-speed cameras and sensitive force sensors capture the moment of rupture, revealing patterns of stress and slip that echo the behavior of real faults deep underground. Such experiments, combined with the data harvested from the world's seismic networks, have yielded insights into the mechanics of earthquakes, the sudden release of pent-up strain, the fractal geometry of fault surfaces, the eerie phenomenon of earthquake aftershocks diminishing with time in a mathematical dance. And yet, for all the advances in detection and understanding, much remains wrapped in mystery. The precise prediction of earthquakes, knowing exactly when and where the next great rupture will occur, remains tantalizingly out of reach. The Earth's crust is a system of staggering complexity, its faults governed by chaotic processes, its signals sometimes masked or mimicked by other forces. Seismologists have learned to listen more carefully, to sift through vast oceans of data, to build models that can forecast probabilities, but the ultimate secrets of timing and place remain elusive. Still, progress comes in unexpected forms. Through the study of slow earthquakes, events that release energy over days or weeks rather than in a sudden jolt, scientists have discovered new kinds of movement along faults, hidden tremors that once went unnoticed. By deploying dense networks of sensors in earthquake-prone regions, researchers have detected foreshocks and subtle shifts that sometimes precede major events, raising the hope of someday catching the Earth in the act of winding up for a quake. So the story of detecting the undetectable continues, a story as much about invention as about patience, as much about listening as about probing, as much about what we have uncovered as what remains to be learned. And as the night deepens, the quiet vigil of seismographs around the world continues. Their needles and sensors, now digital, now silent, listen for the next whisper from the planet's restless heart, ready to capture the fleeting signals that ripple through stone and time. It is a science ever on the threshold, poised between what is known and what lies just beyond the reach of certainty. In this world of invisible waves and hidden ruptures, where the undetectable becomes visible only through the most ingenious of instruments, another question emerges, a question not just of how we detect, but how we prepare, how we build, and how we live on a planet that moves beneath our feet. Somewhere beneath the hush of midnight, while the world above slumbers in uneasy peace, the Earth's crust holds its breath. It is a pause older than memory, a silence that hums with potential. For in that stillness, in the secret dark beneath our homes, mountains, and seas, the next tremor is already woven into the tapestry of time. We, the waking dreamers on the skin of this planet, live always with the knowledge, sometimes close, sometimes distant, that the ground underfoot is not immutable, not truly safe, but alive, restless, and profoundly indifferent to our certainties. Tonight, as you lie quietly, let me guide you not just down to the roots of stone and fault, but into the echoing chambers of thought and feeling that earthquakes inspire in the human spirit. for every tremor is a question, every convulsion a reminder, every aftershock a whisper of our own fragility. What does it mean, after all, to belong to a world that shudders and shifts without warning? What is it to build, to hope, to love, on a planet that can, in the briefest breath, remake the very ground on which all stories are written? In the aftermath of a great quake, when the dust has not yet settled, and the air is taut with the scent of stone and fear, there is a peculiar stillness. Streets once busy with laughter or commerce lie deserted, buildings lean or crumble, and in the faces of survivors there flickers a strange and searching light. Some will call it shock, others grief, but for many it is the dawning realization that the world is not as solid as it seemed. This is the first philosophical legacy of the earthquake. It shakes not only buildings and bridges, but the inner architecture of certainty. It is a moment in which the illusion of control, so carefully tended in daily life, is revealed for what it is, a thin veneer stretched over the unruly depths of nature. Human beings are architects of security, builders of meaning. We measure, map, and strengthen. We devise codes, develop sensors, and craft stories about the taming of chaos. Yet the earthquake is a force that resists narrative closure. It reminds us, with a single jolt, that the ground itself is not a stage, but a fellow actor, unpredictable and unscripted. For millennia, philosophers have pondered the nature of change, the tension between permanence and flux. Heraclitus, the ancient thinker, declared that everything flows, that no man ever steps in the same river twice. But perhaps the earthquake, more than any river or cloud, is the truest expression of this cosmic restlessness. It is change embodied in stone, a paradox, a riddle. Consider the cities that have risen and fallen by the hand of seismic unrest. Lisbon, in 1755, was a jewel of the Enlightenment, a city of light and reason. When the earthquake struck on All Saints' Day, followed by fire and flood, it was not only stone that crumbled, but trust in the rational order of things. Philosophers across Europe were shaken in their faith. Voltaire, for example, would question the optimism of Leibniz, who had argued that this was the best of all possible worlds. How could such suffering, such indiscriminate destruction, be reconciled with any notion of a just or ordered universe? The quake became a symbol not only of physical upheaval, but of metaphysical doubt, a tremor that spread from Lisbon's ruins to the salons and studies of the world. Yet for all their terror, earthquakes also call forth another, more hopeful kind of reflection. When the ground is still, we may be lulled into forgetfulness, imagining ourselves as masters of our fate. But in the wake of disaster, something remarkable often stirs in the human heart. Communities gather amid the rubble, voices call out for neighbors, hands reach to clear debris, to comfort, to rebuild. The earthquake, for all its violence, becomes a crucible in which compassion and resilience are forged anew. In the stories told by survivors, in the songs sung to mourn or to heal, there is a recognition of our shared vulnerability, a kinship born not of strength, but of mutual frailty. This, perhaps, is the second lesson of the quake, that our true security is found not in stone or steel, but in the bonds we weave with one another. The philosopher Martin Heidegger spoke of being in the world, a condition of embeddedness, of belonging not merely to a place, but to a web of relationships. Earthquakes lay bare the truth of this insight. In their aftermath, it is not wealth or status that matters most, but the presence of another human hand, the comfort of a voice, the warmth of community. The trembling earth, in its own way, asks us to remember this, that the world is not simply ground upon which we stand, but a living, shifting context in which we are always, already, together. As science has advanced, we have learned to read the signs of the restless earth with ever greater finesse. Seismographs trace the invisible passage of waves. Satellites peer from orbit to measure the subtle deformation of continents. We chart the risks, draw hazard maps, and drill for safety. Yet, with each advance, we are reminded anew of the limits of foresight. The earthquake remains, in essence, unpredictable, a phenomenon governed by laws we can model but not master, a dance of plates and faults that sometimes slips just beyond our grasp. Here we encounter a third philosophical thread: humility before the unknown. This humility is not defeat, but an invitation to listen more deeply, to respect the world's complexity, to dwell, as the poet Rilke once wrote, in the open. For what is an earthquake, if not a message written in the language of the planet itself? Each tremor is a syllable in a story billions of years in the making, a reminder that we are latecomers to a drama far older than our cities or even our species. The rocks that break and grind beneath us were once molten rivers, flowing in the darkness before the first tree or insect. Their shifting is both an echo of the past and a prelude to futures we cannot yet imagine. And so the quake asks us to widen our sense of time, to stretch our imaginations beyond the span of a single life or even a single civilization. It reminds us that the world is not a finished product, but a work in perpetual progress, a planet still becoming, still dreaming its continents into being. The philosopher Alfred North Whitehead spoke of process as the fundamental reality, not things, but happenings, not substance, but change. In the earthquake, we glimpse this truth with visceral clarity. The ground is not ground, not truly. It is motion slowed to a crawl, a river of stone moving in ages rather than hours, whose sudden leaps and spasms are simply the surface ripples of deeper, slower tides. There is, too, a sense in which earthquakes invite us to reflect on our relationship with risk and uncertainty. In the modern world, we are taught to mitigate danger, to seek insurance, to plan for every contingency. Yet, as the Japanese experience reveals, even the most prepared societies can be caught off guard. The Great East Japan earthquake of 2011 unleashed not only physical devastation, but also a crisis of confidence, a reckoning with the limits of technology and the unpredictability of nature. In the face of such events, we are called to balance prudence with acceptance, to work for safety while acknowledging that perfect security is an illusion. Perhaps this is why, in the cultures most familiar with earthquakes, there is a kind of stoic wisdom, a quiet resilience born of living with uncertainty. In Japan, the concept of mono no aware, the gentle, sorrowful awareness of impermanence, finds deep resonance in the experience of seismic life. The cherry blossom, beautiful and fleeting, becomes a symbol not only of aesthetic pleasure, but of the poignancy of existence itself. Earthquakes, in their suddenness and finality, are a stark expression of this ephemerality. They remind us that all things, homes, cities, lives, are temporary, and that meaning is found not in permanence, but in the intensity and quality of our engagements, however brief. From this perspective, the quake is not only a threat, but a teacher. It urges us to cherish what we have, to live not in fear, but in gratitude, to build with care, and to let go with grace. The ruins that follow a major event are not merely scars, but invitations to remember, to honor, to begin again. In the poetry of Basho or the haiku of Issa, we find the echo of this sensibility, a willingness to see beauty even in destruction, to accept loss as part of the world's ongoing song. Yet, for all that is lost in a great earthquake, there is also much that is found. Scientists, in their quest to understand, have learned to listen to the earth in ways that were once unimaginable. The rumble of a distant tremor, the faint groan of a fault slowly loading, the signature of microseisms from faraway storms, each is a clue, a thread in the fabric of planetary life. We have come to see the Earth not as a static backdrop, but as a dynamic system, a living, breathing planet whose surface is in constant dialogue with its depths. This knowledge, hard-won and ongoing, is itself a kind of consolation, a reminder that even in uncertainty there is always more to discover, always another layer of meaning to unearth. In the arts, too, the earthquake has left its mark. From the ancient Chinese myth of dragons stirring beneath the soil, to the trembling canvases of contemporary painters, to the trembling verses of poets who have felt the earth move underfoot, the quake is a motif of transformation. It is both rupture and renewal, an event that destroys but also creates space for the new. In the wake of disaster, artists and writers have sought not only to bear witness, but to make sense, to find in the chaos a seed of understanding. Their works remind us that the quake is not only a physical phenomenon, but a wellspring of metaphor, a symbol of disruption, of sudden change, of the unpredictable heart of life itself. So, as you listen in the quiet dark, perhaps you sense the heartbeat of the planet beneath your resting form. It is a slow, patient rhythm, measured not in seconds, but in centuries. It is the pulse of mantle and crust, the slow drift of continents, the occasional leap and shudder that marks the passage of geologic time. To live on such a world is to be both guest and participant in a story far larger than ourselves, a drama of stone and fire, of water and air, of life emerging, flourishing, and sometimes perishing in the blink of an eye. Yet despite all this, we return again and again to build, to dream, to make homes and gardens, to raise children and sing songs. The quake may topple towers, but it cannot extinguish the human urge to belong, to root ourselves in place, to make meaning even amid uncertainty. In this, perhaps, lies the deepest conundrum of all, that we are creatures of both vulnerability and hope, forever poised between fear and wonder, ever seeking to find our footing on shifting ground. Somewhere, even now, a fault deep beneath the ocean, or the distant steppe, is preparing its next movement, a subtle rearrangement of stresses, a slow accumulation of strain. The earth is not through with us, nor are we finished with it. We are bound together in a dance whose steps we only partly understand, whose music is sometimes thunderous, sometimes silent as the stars. As we drift towards sleep, let us carry with us the quiet knowledge that to be alive on this planet is to dwell in the midst of uncertainty, to find meaning not despite, but because of, the trembling of the world. The quake conundrum remains, a question, a lesson, an invitation to reflect, to connect, and to wonder at our place in the ongoing story of Earth. And somewhere, in the darkness beneath the world, the story continues, waiting for its next verse, its next subtle shift, its next awakening. As our journey through the shifting secrets of the earth gently drifts to a close, we watch the story settle like a comet tail fading into the hush of space. May your mind wander peacefully amidst the quiet tremors beneath our feet, and when you're ready for more Dreamtime tales, return to float once again among the mysteries of our wondrous cosmos.